Put on the shades.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Fantasy Football Weekly. We got the family back together again. Just a little behind-the-scenes peek. Right before we were going live, Kevin, at the last second, made sure to grab his shades and make sure he was in full dress attire. Exactly. Today we're going to be talking about some early redraft candidates, top 10s at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end. It's crazy. We're talking redraft already, but why the hell not? So let's get into it at the other side of this. Like I said, it is great to have the fam back together again. Let's start with somebody who we've been missing since the draft show, since she, just very famously, just basically anytime I talked about Liatu Latu being drafted ahead of her number one guy on defense, I would get the middle finger, and I totally appreciated it because I was actually and totally deserved it. Britt Flynn, welcome back. How you doing?
I'm so glad to be back. I kind of, don't know how to speak on the internet anymore. It's kind of weird,
What do with my hands?
What do I
do with my hands?
Yeah, I don't know. Luckily, they're down here. The camera doesn't go that far, so that's great. I could just play with my fingernails and stem and do all that fun stuff. But yeah, it's fun. I'm glad to be back. We're in the throes of draft season. We were actually even talking at the festival that we were at last week. Sellers was like, I haven't done any best balls. Why haven't I done any best balls? We need to do that. Do you want to do a best ball during the festival? So the bug has officially struck, and it's good to be back talking about football.
And it's just in time, too, because we're about to hit June. We're about to hit the doldrums of the fantasy football season where it's like, everybody's scrambling to talk about things. And, we still got best ball. We still got high-stakes tournaments. We still got all sorts of stuff going on. And fortunately for us, Scott Fish Bowl, we were teased earlier. I gave everybody a heart attack for those who are watching in our private group chat because we had the plans for today all delineated out. Okay, you're talking about this position and you're talking about this position. And then all of a sudden Scott Fish puts out a tweet where it's like, big announcement coming at 4. And it's like, scrap everything we had just planned. Let's just focus on this. And it's like, whoa. Totally my bad. But not my bad is next week we'll be talking about the Scott Fish Bowl 14 rules on next week's show because that is what the news was. Scott Fish is going to be announcing the rules next week for Scott Fish Bowl 14. The big news today from Scott Fish was that go check out the Scott Fish Bowl store, get your Scott Fish Bowl 14 merchandise there. Kevin Tompkins, what's going on with you, man?
It's as the great Ian Hartitz once said, it is a great day to be great, but tonight is a great night to be right. What we're going to be talking about today will go down in the annals of history as the definitive top 10 wide receivers.
I love it. The annals of history. I love it. Keith Fleming, how about you, sir?
I'm doing very well. Britt, one of my favorite quotes of all time is from the great Big Bird, who said, nobody likes to be sick. And that is so true. So I hope that you feel better and appreciate you being here with us. We've missed you and excited to have the band back together for a little Blues Brothers reference there. And if you're somebody under the age of probably 30, 35 and have no idea, great old movie. You should check it out. I'm assuming it's on a streaming service, but they're on a mission from God. Come on.
There are a lot of references you just threw out right there, and I'm wondering whether or not our audience caught half of them.
Probably not. I'm old. What can I say?
It's like Taylor Swift Easter eggs. We're going to be combing through these for years.
Right.
So what we thought we would do for y'all today is basically go through each position in a round robin type of format where we'll start with the quarterbacks and go all the way around through tight ends, our number ones at each position. Then we'll go through number twos. And of course, if any of y'all have questions or comments or want to chime in as far as your thoughts on where we have these players ranked, please drop them in the comments section over on our YouTube channel. And while you're over on our YouTube channel, make sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you are notified whenever we put out awesome fantasy football content here at Fantasy and Frames, as well as other members of the Fantasy and Frames Fantasy Football family. And with that, let me kick us off here at the quarterback position. let me tell you, I had 3 quarterbacks that I was on the drive home today. I was like, they're 1, 2, 3. No, they're 1, 2, 3. No, they're 1, 2, 3. And I'm sitting there and I'm just like, man, I need to find some type of way to really, parse these guys out. And I'm having such a hard time. And so I got back home and I was like, Jorge, let's keep it simple, stupid. We've all heard of the expression, Kiss, keep it simple, stupid. Let's figure out what is it that makes a quarterback so valuable in fantasy. Well, we know the cheat code is a big deal, right? The rushing yards that's available there, great. Being able to complete passes to your receivers, great. Scoring touchdowns, being high proficient in that department, whether it's rushing touchdowns or passing touchdowns, awesome. And let's not also forget the key concept of like, if you're on a team with bad skill players around you, like you're going to be asked to kind of shoulder the load a lot on this team. And so when I was looking at the wide receivers and tight ends for Mr. Lamar Jackson, who I have as my number 1 quarterback heading in 2024,
Love it.
You have Zay Flowers, you have Mark Andrews, and you have Derrick Henry. The other wide receivers, Rashad Bateman, boo, Nelson Aguilar. Come on, are we still doing the Nelson Aguilar thing? I just see this being a situation where nothing's going to change from this year. Yes, we have Mark Andrews, hopefully healthy for the entire season. Zay Flowers takes this next step, but I still see there being a thunder and lightning situation at the running back position. It just so happens that lightning is going to continue to be Lamar Jackson. You got to remember that Keaton Mitchell, he's not going to be playing for a lot of the season just because he's still recovering from that late season. I believe that was an ACL injury. Gus Bus is gone. Gus Edwards is gone. J.K. Dobbins is gone. Like somebody needs to run the ball here outside of Derrick Henry, and it's going to be Lamar Jackson. And let's say there's a situation Lamar Jackson has to have the ball in his hands throwing the ball. According to BFF, he was the quarterback 2 rated passer when passing under pressure, number 1 in big-time throws when under pressure. Had the lowest turnover-worthy play percentage when under pressure. So nothing can rattle this guy. This guy can make plays everywhere, throwing, rushing the ball. So he right there for me just screams, and here's the thing. He may not be like NFL MVP again. That's not what I'm saying. For fantasy, I think he's going to be your fantasy football MVP. Whether the Ravens as a team take the next step at the NFL level, that's not what I'm here to discuss. I'm just here to talk about who I think has the best chance of putting up top quarterback fantasy numbers, and that's why I'm going with Lamar Jackson. Anybody does that, does shock anybody, me saying Lamar Jackson, or is that something that you can get behind?
Oh, sorry, go ahead. You said Britt, right? So I was recording. That's my fault. Go ahead, Britt.
Well, I was just going to say that as somebody who has said that Patrick Mahomes is not the QB1, just be prepared for backlash if you go in with that take, because people
those were times.
Yes, those were times. And you know what? I wasn't exactly wrong. He finished right at ADP, and then the year after, whatever. I was just a year too early. Okay, it's fine. My process was good. Whatever. But just be prepared for those trolls who are going to come after you. However, I do think that what you're saying is correct. And he does have a great supporting cast around him. I think that the team around him, not even just the skill position players, but the offensive line, his defense, they put him in such a great position that he doesn't have to make these crazy throws. He doesn't have to do anything stupid. And like you said, even when he is under pressure, he's very cool, calm, collected. So I can definitely get behind Lamar Jackson being QB1 this year.
Yep. Keith, what are you going to say?
Yeah, sorry, I got a little excited. I think that the part that you left out, and it's why I'm so high on the Ravens, and I agree with you, I would have Lamar Jackson for sure as number 1 QB, is there's actually 2 parts of it. One is he's slimmed down, and I think that is because he's going to run more this season. It's not, a shocker anymore to realize that these quarterbacks, you can't hit them anymore. So I actually like, a lot of people were freaking out. Oh, he looks thin. That extra speed could lead to a few more 40, 50-yard touchdowns. And he's always been someone who, unlike, which we're all worried about with Jaden Daniels, sorry, Jorge, he rarely ever takes those big hits. He always gets out of the way. He slides. He runs out of bounds. So I don't think it's a big deal he lost weight. But what I like the most about Lamar and the Ravens is Todd Monken, throw out the last game. I don't know what the hell happened. in that playoff game. But I will say he was an incredible play caller at Georgia. And to see the difference in his first year with Stetson Bennett and then what he came back and did the second year, knowing what Stetson could and couldn't do, what he excelled at, what he struggled with. Lamar Jackson is obviously a million times better than Stetson Bennett, but I still think Todd Monken is that good of a play caller that he is going to have learned a ton last year from actually calling plays for Lamar. And you're going to see that offense. If we remember down the stretch, they were unstoppable in the regular season. I think you're going to see a lot of that from the rip. And Lamar would have been the QB number 1 overall last year, if not for kind of the slow start that offense got off to, as they were, again, had all these new pieces. Lamar was coming back from missing a good bit of the year before, new offensive coordinator. All that is a lot more steady this year. And you also didn't mention Isaiah Likely, who I keep pounding the table. He was their best receiver last year on a bunch of different metrics. And I think they're going to use both Likely and Andrews on the field a lot together, because I don't know why you would keep Likely off the field when he was arguably the best pass catcher that Lamar threw to.
I was trying to keep him out of people's ears so that his ADP still was remaining low, but
people think I'm an idiot, so I don't think you have to worry about
good
that.
Good luck getting on a stream with Keith Fleming and not having Isaiah Likely reference. Like, if that doesn't happen, I think you need to do a wellness check.
Yep, him and Ladd.
Yeah. It's our new bingo card.
It really is. Yeah, Lamar is like the vibes-based QB1 for sure. Like, when you talk about Josh Allen, all those, the downgrade in weapons, Curtis Samuel, Keon Coleman, Dalton Kincaid, certainly having replaced Stephon Diggs' production. Jalen Hurts might not get the rushing touchdowns that we've been accustomed to with Jason Kelce retiring, them getting Saquon Barkley. So shave a little bit off the top with Jalen Hurts, and then the OC factor. You take Monken over Joe Brady over Kellen Moore. Those kind of tiebreakers. I mean, it's hard not to click. Lamar Jackson is the most fun click out of those top 3 quarterbacks for sure.
And he's shown that he has the highest upside. Still the greatest fantasy season of all time. And I'm not saying he'll reach that level, but I actually was saying last year I thought he'd be near it. He wasn't, but he still did average 21 points per game, which he's done at a minimum every year they start at least 4 or 5 games.
All right, Britt, take us to the running back. Who's your RB1 early redraft going into this season?
Yeah, unlike you with the quarterbacks, I did not have to think hard on my number 1 running back, and that's going to be Christian McCaffrey. I mean, slam dunk. I know, right? It honestly should come to a surprise to absolutely no one. We don't need to spend a lot of time on it. He's basically remained injury-free for the past 2 seasons, which was the big knock on him in seasons prior. He's playing in one of the best offenses in the league, and that play calling is really designed around his strengths, whether it is giving him a rushing touchdown, a passing touchdown. They want to get this guy in the end zone. He's first across the board in basically every metric. And with no major changes on this offense, he should be just as good this year as he was last year. So I'm not going to overthink it. It's CMC for me.
Kevin, at wide receiver, who do you got?
I'm going to deviate a little bit from the norm because we're all just so accustomed to clicking CeeDee Lamb. It's Tyreek Hill for me. 3.82 yards per route run is absolutely maniacal. A full 0.72 yards ahead of the next highest yards per route run. That was Nico Collins last year. Hyper condensed target share, as we've gotten accustomed to in Miami, with him and Jalen Waddle combining for almost 50% of the targets last season. Yes, they added Odell Beckham. They added Jalen Wright. He's not going to factor into the passing game. So it should be the status quo with those wide receivers. Jalen Waddle got paid too. So are you really worried about how that pecking order is going to shape up after those first 2? What are you going to pin 70 targets on Braxton Berrios? Good luck.
Alex Earl effect.
And then, I mean, he's been super efficient his last 2 seasons in Miami. His yards per route run and yards per target are the highest of his career since his 2017-2018 first and second season. So whatever he's got in Miami, keep it going. He's locked in as a wide receiver 1, the overall wide receiver 1 for me over Lamb.
Keith, who's your number 1 tight end heading into this season in redraft?
I think a lot of people are going to whiff on this, but it's Travis Kelce. And I know that's always been the guy that everybody, no question, it's Kelce. And if you were like me saying he should have gone like top 5, top 6, and just traditional fantasy football leagues last year. I'm sorry. Of course, the year that I picked him, he gets injured, but he still ended up with 90 catches, 900 yards, 5 touchdowns. He's now done that in 6 straight seasons. Again, he was battling injuries early in the year. And to me, it was about those last 4 games. Okay. So the biggest games of the year when he was the most healthy he's been all season, 37 targets, 32 receptions, 355 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Rashee Rice, don't know what's going to happen. Marquise Brown, we'll see. I know everybody loves that they drafted Xavier Worthy. To me, it sounds like a lot of question marks in the passing game. There's one very consistent guy in Travis Kelce. I think he has basically one great year left in him, and I think this is it. And I actually think he could end up putting up arguably the biggest numbers in catches and targets that he's had in his career this year.
Mr. Scamper's in the chat. Travis still had a career year by many off-the-field metrics.
Touche.
Yes. Did something happen? Did I miss something? Anywho, good for you, Travis, on and off the field. All right, my quarterback 2 real quick. And Kevin, you basically nailed my second and third picks, but I'll wait till number 3. Josh Allen, number 2. You lose Stephon Diggs. You have a bunch of, uncertain wide receivers. Like, who's going to step forward and be that number 1? Is it going to be Khalil Shakir? Is Curtis Samuel, who under Joe Brady was very efficient in his last season in Carolina? So that's not something to just scoff at, but you have Dalton Kincaid. It just screams, you know what, Josh Allen, I'm just going to take the ball and do it myself. Screw this. So it kind of seems like that's the route they're going to go. But we did see that offense kind of utilize more wide receivers as the season went on towards the end of the season, heading towards the playoffs. Maybe there is some concerted effort to take the ball out of Josh Allen's hands, which is my only real concern as to why I didn't have him as my number 1 ranked quarterback. Britt, who's your RB2?
So I had a tough time picking between my 2 and 3, but I landed on Breece Hall as my number 2 because despite playing with some really bad quarterbacks last season, coming off that ACL, which kind of, slowed him down in the first half of the season, he finally showed what he was capable of towards the end of the year, using his combination of rushing skills and pass catching ability. Like the 19 targets or something crazy that he got in a couple of those games was insane. You've also got Aaron Rodgers, presumably coming back healthy. So this offense should be in a much better situation than it was last year. Hall should be able to shine in this offense. It also helps that he will be 2 years removed from that ACL injury that did inhibit his play a little last year. And they didn't really go out and get anybody else who is going to take away from his touches. So I think Breece Hall is going to have a really stellar year, even in a really tough conference.
Very nice. Kevin, who's your wide receiver 2?
Yeah, so if it's not Tyreek Hill, it's CeeDee Lamb here. I think the dude has legitimate actual 200 target upside this year with not much target earning ability anywhere. I mean, Brandon Cooks, we're not talking about spring chicken Brandon Cooks here. We're talking about, in his 30s, and we got Jake Ferguson, who is, you have to worry about some of the touchdown equity with him, but if you're talking PPR leagues and a guy that I would say would be the clubhouse leader in the most targets in the NFL from Dak Prescott, I don't think you can go wrong with CeeDee Lamb and his wide receiver 1 season last year, kind of repeating a top 3 finish. I think he's going to do that this year.
Keith, who's your tight end 2?
I'm going with Trey McBride. This Cardinals offense, I think, is going to be really good. And I know a lot of people look at the Harrison edition and go, oh, that's going to hurt McBride. Au contraire, my friend. I believe that's going to draw a lot of attention, leaving McBride to do what he did, particularly once Kyler Murray was healthy at the end of the year. Over his last 10 games, 5 or more receptions in 8 of them, 6 or more in 7, 7 or more in half of them. He is a freak. And I was a big believer in Trey McBride. Coming out of college, was pretty disappointed with his first season, not going to lie. Zach Ertz, what the hell? But now we've seen what this guy can do. And again, what I like the most is him and Kyler Murray already have that connection. I'm not saying that obviously I think Harrison and Murray will be great, but it's going to give him a leg up early in the season. And when we're talking about somebody who I think is just going to still see, a 20+% target share, McBride may be the only guy that I know for sure on this list of tight ends outside of Kelsey that I think is going to get that kind of share consistently. And he proved last year he can put up points with it.
Very nice, very nice. Let's go to our third round of players here. Number 3, we talked about Lamar. We talked about Josh Allen. It's Jalen Hurts for me. Back to 2021 among qualified quarterbacks, aka those who played more than 9 games. QB6 in points per game, QB1 in 2022, QB2 in 2023. 6th best rated quarterback when under pressure. 2nd best rated quarterback rushing when under pressure. 2nd lowest turnover rate when under pressure. The elephant in the room is here. Like, is Saquon Barkley going to take away red zone touches? Is he going to where's he fall into this? I have no doubt that Jalen Hurts will still evade pressure and get you those yards and get you the scrambles, but we want the touchdowns. We want the 6s. Are we going to get that with now Saquon Barkley there? Which is my only concern, which is why I have him at 3. Britt, who do you have at running back 3?
So I'm going to go with Bijan Robinson. Now that Arthur Smith is out of Atlanta, we can finally believe in Bijan Robinson. And he would have been my number 2, aside from the fact that Tyler Algier is still in that backfield, and he is still probably going to have a role, much to our chagrin. Now, it won't be nearly as big of a role as he had last year, but I think he's still going to take away a few of those touches. But this coaching change definitely helps Bijan, because Raheem Morris coming out of LA, we saw what he did with Kieran Williams, developed him from nothing into something. And Bijan objectively has much more talent than Kieran Williams. I just don't see that full workload that Breece Hall will have or Saquon Barkley will have, but I really, really like him to have a 2nd-year breakout.
Nice. Kevin, who do you got as your wide receiver 3?
It's going to be kind of a surprise, maybe to some, but whenever you're talking about the best wide receiver in football, Justin Jefferson, it's hard to kind of rank, in underdog. I mean, you have Amon-Ra St. Brown, you have Jamar Chase ahead of him. I still don't get it. We're still talking about a hyper condensed offense in Minnesota. Everything he did last season was either completely in line or better than his first 3 seasons metric wise. He's had a 2.6 yard routes per route run at least in 3 out of 4 years, and the other one was 2.59. And then with quarterback changes, the Vikings still should keep a top 6, top 7 pass rate over expected. So I'm not super worried about JJ McCarthy versus Kirk Cousins. While some efficiency may drop, I think that's going to be mitigated with some volume between him, Addison, and then Hawkinson's going to be there probably mid-season to the end of the year as well. I'm not worried about the volume. I'm not worried about JJ McCarthy, because I do believe that he can at least get him the ball and work on some volume and then efficiency later on. So I'm still on the Justin Jefferson trade. I don't get why he's slipping in drafts. And whenever I've had like a 6, 7, 8 pick, for some reason, he's always there, and it feels like stealing.
It does. I 1,000% agree. Just look at the numbers he put up with Nick Mullins. No matter what you think of McCarthy or even Darnold, they're better than Nick Mullins. Tight end number 3. Let's get nuts. Brock Bowers. He's a generational talent. I've been screaming it from the mountaintops. Nobody wants to listen. Oh, he went to a place with a tight end. Oh, he went to a place with Devontae Adams. Let me tell you something. This guy is special. At UGA, the school that won back-to-back national titles, by the way, he was an 18-year-old freshman. 18 for literally every game of that season except for the national championship. 56 receptions, led the team. 882 yards receiving, led the team. 13 receiving touchdowns, led the team. A reminder of some of the talent on that UGA team on the offensive side of the ball. James Cook. We had all your boys. A.D. Mitchell was there. Burton was there at that time. You had George Pickens. I mean, all these pro guys. Darnell Washington. And it was a 18-year-old Brock Bowers. A lot of people questioned the Raiders selecting him. If they were selecting him as a tight end, I would agree. It would be baffling. They're not. They're selecting him as an offensive weapon. I think they're going to use him in the backfield. I think they're going to line him up at the slot. I think they're going to play 2 tight end sets at times. And I think this guy, I truly don't think that enough people watched UGA games, because you put a safety or corner on him, they're going to have a really bad time trying to tackle him. You put a linebacker on him, he's going to go just right by them like they're nothing. I think this guy will be the number one tight end in football by next year. And it would not shock me if he's the number one tight end in football this year. So I had to put him third and really question ranking McBride over him. But with what McBride did last year and Bowers being a rookie, temper expectations a little bit. But I think Bowers to the moon this year.
I want to make a bet with you, and it's not and the thing is, like, if I was to lose and say that Bowers wasn't the number 3 tight end at the end of the season, I wouldn't feel bad because I actually do have a lot of invested in Brock Bowers in best ball drafts, so I wouldn't be hurting too badly. All right, let's go to the fours here. My quarterback 4 from weeks 15 through 18 averaged rushing 8.2 yards per carry, 6.4, 4.8, 6.6. He is joined now in the desert with rookie Marvin Harrison and the aforementioned Trey McBride, James Conner. And looking at their schedule, and again, it depends on if you want to take a lot of stock in strength of schedule from year to year. I find it helpful as a tool. Is it the be-all, end-all? No. But when looking at it compared to like how well the teams performed last year, outside of October, their schedule is looking pretty promising here. He's another year removed from that ACL injury. I'm talking about Kyler Murray. I think he gets back to his 2020-21 form where he was the QB2 and QB4. In this case, I have him as my QB4. I think the rushing upside is going to be there. I think the Cardinals are about to surprise a lot of teams offensively this year, and Kyler Murray is going to be the primary catalyst for that resurgence in the desert. Britt, who guys you're running back for?
Yeah, so I'm going with an oldie but goodie here, Saquon Barkley, with a change of scenery in Philadelphia. He has the best offensive line that he has ever played behind. And we saw his production in New York behind one of the worst offensive lines in the league. Think of what he's going to be able to do behind not only a competent offensive line, but a good offensive line. Now, I think that although he could very well be the number 1 running back of this season, his upside is going to be capped by those goal line vultures by Jalen Hurts. I don't think we're going to see as much from Jalen Hurts as Kevin mentioned earlier. Now that Jason Kelsey's gone, that tush-push X factor is now removed from the equation. But I still think they're going to try it, and it's going to be enough that it's going to knock down Barkley's touchdown production a little bit. However, Barkley is such a good running back. And now that he's not having to fight with getting contacted, a yard ahead of the line of scrimmage, I think he's actually going to be able to produce. So he should have one of the top opportunity shares in the entire league. He's going to be behind a better offensive line. Much to my chagrin as a Cowboys fan, I think that he's going to have a stellar year. And like I said, could very well finish as the RB1, but I'm playing it safe by putting him at 4.
If we had to put something, if we had to make a 2023 time capsule of fantasy football and we had to open it up 25 years after, I think people would be most shocked when they open it up and go, what the hell is a tush push?
Right.
Like, think about that. You could probably have Puka Nacua in there. You'd probably have a lot of other things. The tush push would be like, what the hell are people thinking? They had to go on whatever Wikipedia they have in 2050.
Well, let's see what they would say in 2024 with your number 4 wide receiver heading into the 2024 season.
That is a world-class segue, by the way, Jorge. I do want to say
that was greeny level beautiful. Right there. Yeah.
Right?
Greeny level. Wow, that's a good compliment. Thank you.
Love it. So mine, I've kind of bounced around with my wide receivers because I like what I like, and it is what it is, and it's a great night to be right. Amon-Ra St. Brown is my wide receiver 4. Look, he's the clear target, top target in Lions offense. But the only one kind of knock on him is he has a lower ADOT than any of the elite wide receivers around him with ADOT 7, 6.5 yards, 8 yards last year, which was a career high, but it's still nowhere near kind of what we want from elite wide receivers. He's really going to make that up with just pure volume. And another thing that kind of scares me a little bit is the fact that Detroit makes no qualms about wanting to be super safe when they have a lead and running the ball. But Amon-Ra St. Brown is awesome, especially in a full PPR. Maybe I would have him a little bit lower in a half PPR, but in a full PPR, I do want Amon-Ra St. Brown. So I put him over Chase, which is spoiler alert. Sorry.
Wendy in the chat here. Oh my God, all my favorite people. We love you, Wendy. Welcome to the show. Keith, who's your tight end for?
Man, very similar to Kevin. If this was, and I'm sorry, earmuff Stacy. If this was a traditional league, Sam Laporta would be number 4 on my list. Because it is PPR, I'm going with Dalton Kincaid. You look at it, once Joe Brady took over, the Buffalo offense really changed. And it's one reason I've been a little surprised to see people so down on a lot of the Bills' weapons, because Allen was more efficient. You look at like Khalil Shakir came on. Kincaid had a lot of good games. James Cook obviously 8. I think they kind of figured out, look, we can do a little bit of what Kansas City did in that first year when they lost Tyreek Hill of, we're going to go from a big play team to these longer drives, which, take a lot more pressure off your defense because they have time to rest. They put a lot more pressure on the opposing defense. And I mean, if you look at it, Kincaid got peppered with targets down the stretch. He took over in the Jets game. From that point on, he had targets of 7, 6, 8. There was 2 weeks with 2, 7, 8, and then 6 and 5 in the playoffs. And what I like is he turned those into receptions in those games, 6, 5, 5, 7, 5. So what was that, like 6 out of the 9 games, he had at least 5 receptions. The touchdowns are a little concerning. Don't get me wrong. I'd like to see Kincaid score more. I also think, though, he was a rookie. They were figuring it out. Diggs was still there. There's a vacuum here. And I can't tell you who it's going to be that ends up getting that touchdown pie from Diggs, who has scored touchdowns historically in Buffalo. But Kincaid is definitely one of the favorites for that. And if you look at the amount of targets and receptions that he has and the kind of tight end he is in a PPR league, that gives him the upside. And that's why I have him slightly ahead of Laporta.
Very nice. All right, let's go to the 5s here. My quarterback 5, it's Patrick Mahomes. You go back to 2021, QB4, QB1 last year, QB11. But let's look at his receiving options, this year on paper. Okay, Rashee Rice, he's not missing the entire year. He'll be back at some point. We saw the chemistry develop between these two. I'm not here to debate the legality of it. He'll be back for football purposes. You have Hollywood Brown coming over. Maybe this is it. Patrick Mahomes can't unlock Hollywood Brown. I don't really know who can unlock Hollywood Brown to his full potential. Travis Kelce should be healthy. Let's not forget, he started last year with that knee injury that hampered him for a good chunk of the season. And then once he started to get healthy, especially during the playoffs, right, when we needed him, when they needed him most, he came on strong. Look, they drafted Xavier Worthy. Like I said, on paper, as far as an entire receiving group, I think this is probably his best receiving core he's had since he's been a Kansas City Chief. And people are like, oh, what about Tyreek Hill? I'm like, that's 1. Travis Kelce, that's 2. I'm talking about like an entire receiving group here that on paper he has the potential to work magic with. And I just think he has a bounce back from last year. We even saw just with the resurgence of Travis Kelce in terms of his health down the stretch last year, Mahomes was playing great in the playoffs. He looked fantastic. And I see no reason why with these upgrades, with hopefully receivers that can catch the ball and not miss, not drop the ball in glorious fashion, I think Mahomes is right back in the top 5 discussion for fantasy quarterbacks. Is that too spicy there, Britt, for Mahomes being 5, or are you surprised he's not even higher?
No, I think basically on everybody's rankings, everyone thinks that Mahomes is a god and deserves to be number 1 across the board. But I think 5 is a very solid and realistic place to rank him at, especially with all, the issues surrounding Rice, Marquise Brown's health, because we've never seen him play a full season. And then Xavier Worthy is already dealing with hamstring issues. So that could all come into play throughout the season. It might just be a little mix and match of which receiver is going to be on the field from week to week. So I like him there at 5.
Justin Watson it is.
Always. The number 2 last year, Justin Watson.
All that is, to me, again, why I don't get people fading Travis Kelce this year. If you look, like his overall ADP is dropping a lot. There's a lot of like best ball drafts I'm seeing him go. It's like tight end 2, 3, 4. I think that the injury was the main thing last year. And all these questions at receiver, to me, just mean even more targets for a guy that's already, I think, averaged like 125 targets the last, 6-7 years.
Yeah, even if Rice misses 6 games, it's still
It's huge.
in totality
Yeah,
the best wide receiver group that he's played with in the last 2 or 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Britt, who's your running back 5?
So for running back 5, I'm going to go with Jonathan Taylor. And he's another one of those guys that could have been higher, but I was basing this on full PPR. And that lack of receiving work that he gets really caps his upside more than the guys that I have ranked ahead of him. So last year, I know he only played 10 games, but even in those 10 games, he only caught 19 passes for 153 yards. And whether it's Anthony Richardson or Joe Flacco under center, depending on how fast Richardson can come back, neither one of those guys are going to dump the ball off to Taylor. They are going to sling that ball downfield and try to go for the home run ball as it is. However, Taylor is still efficient. Steichen still likes to run the ball quite a bit at one of the highest rates in the league. So we should still see a good year out of Taylor, pending any of those injuries that kind of have plagued him the past 2. I still like his ability, and I'm willing to take him at 5.
Not to mention, you look at, he wasn't there towards the beginning of last year when Anthony Richardson had his 4-game sample size, and one could make the argument that Richardson would have had a longer, more productive year had he had not been able to get injured on these rushing plays, on these design rushing plays that Jonathan Taylor will now have the opportunity to take part in, increasing his workload there. So I love that right there. Kevin, who do you got next?
I already did kind of spoil it a little bit when I did Amon-Ra St. Brown at 4. It's Jamar Chase at 5. Any sort of news finality with T. Higgins does bump Chase up, for me, would be wide receiver 3, closer to CeeDee Lamb than the wide receiver 4 through 6. His ADOT has slipped from 13.6 yards this rookie season down to 9.1. Possibly last year, Joe Burrow had that calf injury at the start at training camp, lingered into the beginning of the season. Then he had the wrist injury, which led to Jake Browning. So that could certainly play a factor into that. Compared to some of those guys around him, though, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, guys like that, his 2.02 yards per route run seems a little disappointing. But fully healthy Burrow with Jamar Chase, if T. Higgins is not there for whatever reason and it's Jermaine Burton as the wide receiver 2 or Yoshi Vest or whoever, I still even think with T. Higgins, Jamar Chase can certainly get a sizable bump that up to about 2.5, and we're still looking at a top 5 wide receiver.
They're going to be able to protect, which to me is the big deal. Like I like what they did in the draft, potentially getting the most talented tackle. And if Burrow has time, I think it's easy to forget what he does down the field. And Jamar Chase is arguably, in my opinion, the best down the field wide receiver when you think about speed, his ability to go get the ball. He's physical grabbing it. I think Chase, it's obviously a little risky, but I love the upside of Chase there. I mentioned Laporta. He is, if you're a Chappelle fan, my 5th tight end. This is not a knock on Laporta. I know that, Stacy's probably cussing me if she's watching right now, but I just think that if you look at the mouths to feed in Detroit, Jamar Gibbs caught a lot of passes last year. Amon-Ra St. Brown is one of the most targeted wide receivers in football, period. And I hate to break it to people, the Jameson Williams breakout year is coming. I still think he's the most talented wide receiver in the last 3 draft classes. And he was injured. He's had some other stuff. And we kind of saw a glimpse of it at the end of last year. And I expect him to make a bigger impact this year. And so for Laporta, I just think his targets are going to be down this year. And then you're talking about touchdowns. And again, Jared Goff was phenomenal last year. I am a little concerned about regression for Jared Goff because it's Jared Goff. I mean, it seems like every time he looks good, defenses kind of, coaching staffs figure something out and then he struggles. So all those things have me marking Laporta down. Obviously, he has huge upside because if the offense ends up being phenomenal, he catches 10, 12 touchdowns. I mean, hell, he could be tight end number 1. I'm just looking at, again, in a PPR league, I want touches. I want to know kind of how many targets are guys getting. And I'm pretty sure that the 4 guys ahead of him are all going to get more targets than he will.
Yeah, Laporta has a very – sorry, go ahead, Britt.
I was just going to say, and now a year in, people actually have tape on Laporta. They didn't have very much tape on him last year as a rookie. Now I think they can figure out how to shut him down a little bit more, and that's going to play in as well.
Yeah, and the thing that's troublesome with me about Laporta is it's almost not even his fault. Is just because he's been steamed up in drafts. So like he has a 29 ADP right now. That's the beginning of the third round. Like that's absurd.
So rich.
As the
I would
first
much
tight
rather
end
take Brock Bowers there than I would Sam Laporta. Like seriously, like I know I'm insane. Don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying that at least Bowers has got Devontae Adams, and that's basically it.
Well,
to where
yeah.
You know what I mean? There's a lot of good players on that Detroit team, and Gibbs really became a passing option that second half of the season. I think that's only going to continue. And then if Williams is getting, targets as well, now it's like, well, how many are you actually getting?
Right. And the overarching narrative about the tight end position, especially in drafts that are going on now, like an underdog, is that you've got all these great tight ends rounds later. Like you could get Mark Andrews in the beginning of the 5th round, Kyle Pitts beginning of the 6th, George Kittle, like guys like that, where why am I paying up for Sam Laporta? Or I mean, Kelsey has kind of risen a little bit lately, but I still think he's a much better pick than Laporta. I think Laporta is I think he'll be coming down when people start coming in to draft more best ball, because I do think that price is just so incredibly inflated.
All right, let's go down to the round 6. Quarterback 6 for me. Rain, Dakota, Prescott, come on down. Finished as the QB4 in points per game. Number 1 graded quarterback passing when under pressure. Had the second most touchdowns thrown when under pressure. Another year with McCarthy. Contract year. No real running backs outside of Zeke. And even Zeke, he's more of a, as we saw towards the end of last year with New England, he's more of a receiving option than he is an actual, in between the tackles, pile up, rushing yardage that way. All that means more passing work, more passing volume. And as CeeDee Lamb goes, so does Dak Prescott. So I think QB6 here is right about where he should be. Britt, who do you got at running back 6?
So 6 and 7 was a really tough decision for me, but I went ahead and went with Kieran Williams. Now, the air around Williams may have cooled a little bit post-draft because the Rams did draft Blake Corum, but Williams is still the RB1 on this team. Last season, he was 2nd in fantasy points per game. I know he missed a little bit of time due to injury, but he still ended up 3rd in total touchdowns, despite only playing in those 12 games. He was 3rd in rushing yards and 1st in snap share. And this was only in 12 games. Like, this guy has everything that you want in a running back, and there's really no reason to think that he's going to regress. The reason he's not higher in the rankings, as I've seen him in some, is because this offense still has a very heavy emphasis on the passing game with Puka Nacua, with Cooper Kupp. I think they're going to get ahead quite a lot, but he's still going to be a very solid fantasy asset with RB1 upside.
Kevin, who do you got as your wide receiver 6?
Maybe another surprise here, if you're very well in tune with some underdog ADP. Garrett Wilson, 5th in open score last year. In the fact that if he can put up 45% air yards, 29% target share, 24% targets per out run with Zach Wilson, imagine what that dude could do with Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah. We're seeing it all a year later. Hopefully Aaron Rodgers can stay healthy. Keith, who do you got?
Stay healthy and stay out of the nut house.
Yeah, I just want to.
Well, he's already taken Malachi Corley.
Yeah, I was gonna say Corley's living with him. So
yeah,
good on Wilson to stay out of that vortex.
Yeah, exactly.
I was so wrong about Wilson too. I'm still mad about that. So the 6th tight end has the potential to be the number 1 tight end at the end of the season. It's Kyle Pitts. It's easy to forget. His only year he's had a decent quarterback, and that was a Matt Ryan that was a year away from being washed, okay, like done. And he caught 67 passes and had 1,000 yards. The last 2 years, he might as well had me, Kevin, and Jorge throwing him passes because it's pretty much the same group. Sorry, guys. Desmond Ridder, Marcus Mariota, Taylor Heineke. What's most insane, he led the league at tight end and unrealized air yards the last 2 years. One of those 2 years, he played 10 games, and he still had the most unrealized air yards in the NFL. But the reason I am so pro Pitts this year, that guy Kirk Cousins, he really likes to throw to tight ends. Last season, 27% of his pass attempts went to tight ends. He has had and made fantasy relevant. Guys like Jordan Reed, Tyler Conklin, Kyle Rudolph, for God's sakes. And if you go back to 2015, Cousins, pass attempts to tight end, number 1 in the NFL among quarterbacks. Passing yards to tight ends, 4th. Passing touchdowns, 4th. 59 passing touchdowns. I think that Pitts is a legit talent. And unfortunately, he has been in one of the worst situations known to man. I actually think people are going to be apologizing to both Kyle Pitts and Drake London this year because they are going to realize these guys are really good. They've just had schmucks throwing them the football last 2 years. Drake London, over 13% of his passes last year were uncatchable, like could not be caught. It's the highest in the league. And again, Pitts had all those unrealized air yards. I expect Pitts to, at worst, have a good season, like 800 to 1,000 yards. I think he's going to score more touchdowns. And as infuriated as I was about Michael Penix, and don't get me wrong, I still don't totally understand it, at least you have that insurance that if Kirk Cousins is not healthy or he's lost a step or whatever, there's not going to be a big drop-off. And again, Pitts, London, those guys are going to have a much better chance of putting up numbers with, Penix than they would most backups. And that Rams offense, that's where we're coming from. Think about how much the Rams tight ends run routes. It's like 98% of the time. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's why I agree with Britt on the Kyron Williams thing. I keep saying this, and I'll say it on every show probably till the draft. When Stafford, Puka, Kupp, and Williams were on the field together, the Rams were the most efficient offense in the NFL and the most efficient offense in 14 years. So the Rams are going to score points if Stafford is healthy. That's good for Kyron Williams. Same type system. Robinson is coming from the Rams, studied under McVay. Obviously, we know Raheem Morris did as well. Falcons offense is going to be really good. The defense, I don't know if we're going to be able to stop anybody, but that's good for fantasy, right? There's nothing better than having a team that's constantly having to have the offense go just to keep up.
Yeah, there's nothing better than being able to kind of prognosticate and know what's going to happen. And in this situation with Zach Robinson, by the way, former Oklahoma State quarterback, who I believe Mike Gundy was the one that said when a reporter was trashing him, come after me. I'm a man. I'm 40.
Was it Robinson that he was talking about?
That was about Zach Robinson. Awesome. But yeah, so now we know from this Shanahan, the McVay tree, where we've seen Kevin O'Connell go to Minnesota and use no depth pieces whatsoever. The guys that are out there are going to be out there. That's a McVay trait. Learn from Kevin O'Connell when he was with the Rams. Now we've got that with Zach Robinson, who's the passing game coordinator, now offensive coordinator with Atlanta. So now Drake London, Kyle Pitts, whoever wins out of Darnell Mooney and Rondale Moore as the third wide receiver. Look, these guys are going to be on the field 90% of the time. You've got Cousins, who's a volume passer. This, we're looking at Rams light here, and I don't think enough people realize that.
Going to be like 60-point over-unders every single week.
Yep.
The Falcons
trust me, the defense is going to suck. Our defense is going to be real bad. We didn't address anything that we needed to on the defensive side of the ball.
The Falcons could literally go from bottom 3 in pass rate over expected the last 3 seasons to top 2. In the span of a year, literally flip the hourglass over.
All right, let's keep this train rolling. Going to the 7th round here. Quarterback 7 for me, Jordan Love. Look, you got upgrades at running back with Josh Jacobs and Marshawn Lloyd. Again, quarterback 6 in points per game last year. Wow. And one of the things you just loved seeing him do was just evade pressure and throw off his back foot. And he just happened to have a plethora of wide receivers who just go up there and catch it. QB9 rated under pressure, QB4 touchdown scored under pressure, QB5 and big time throws under pressure. Those metrics courtesy of Pro Football Focus. You have Jaden Reed, you have Christian Watson, you have Romeo Doubs, you have Tavion Wicks, Luke Musgrave. Good. The guy just, you get a touchdown and you get a touchdown and you get 30 yards and you get 40 yards. The guy is just going to be a stat patter for you here, folks. So I think Jordan Love here is definitely my guy at quarterback 7. Britt, who do you got at running back 7?
So I went with Jahmyr Gibbs here. I really, really wanted to rate him higher, but I can't with David Montgomery still kicking in that backfield.
Smart one.
Now, why I did rank him at 7 is because that pass catching upside and that explosiveness when he catches passes gives him a place in the top 10. So despite ranking 18th in snap share last year and only 34th in opportunity share, he was still 8th in fantasy points per game. He had 52 receptions and 11 total touchdowns. Now, we've already talked about it, that Detroit is stacked with playmakers, so he could have his down weeks, but the upside overall is just too good to pass up, especially when you consider there might be and probably will be some second-year growth sprinkled in there. So love me some Gibbs.
Yeah, Montgomery injury away from potentially being like a top 2 or 3 running back.
Yeah.
Which is not unheard of, because if you look at Montgomery's track history, I don't think he's actually played the full season since coming into the league. So that's definitely possible. Kevin, who's your wide receiver? Where are we at? Seven.
Wide receiver 7, the grown-ass man in my heart, A.J. Brown. Massive 36.6% first read target rate per fantasy points data. Extremely consistent in terms of yards per out run, targets per out run year to year. One kind of knock on him is that Devonta Smith can be a pseudo wide receiver 1 at times and eat into the top end outcomes for A.J. Brown. He's going to get his, but probably not as many as he would get if he were on that offense without Devonta Smith. But still, a grown-ass man in an offense that can return to the most efficient offense in football. We've seen it 2 years ago. We can easily get that again. They've added Saquon Barkley. They subtracted Devontae Parker, which should help that offense. Sorry, that's my one dig. I had to do it on Devontae Parker. He doesn't deserve the slander, although maybe.
Oh, okay. Keith, who's your tight end 7?
I think the biggest winner from everything that happened with the draft and free agency is Evan Ingram in Jacksonville. A lot of turnover at the wide receiver position. So there is a lot of targets and receptions coming up. And I'm also just a big believer in Trevor Lawrence. I think that he's had kind of some bad luck, if you look at it, and some bad coaching at times. Obviously, that first season, I think he's going to have a big year. I would love to be able to say Gabe Davis is, going to get into Jacksonville and figure it out. I don't think I can say that. I think at the end of the day, it's going to be Kirk and Ingram getting peppered with targets this season. And the thing I like about Ingram is he both has a low floor most weeks. I know this from DFS. I use them all the time. But he also is one of those tight ends that he can have monster games in that Jacksonville offense with T-Law. So I have him at number 7.
All right. My quarterback 8, kicking off for the round 8 here, is Anthony Richardson. Here's where I'll drink the Kool-Aid. Week 1, 21.9 points. Week 2, 17.7. Week 3, I believe he had a concussion. Week 4, bounced back with the 29.6 performance. Then I believe in week 5, he played a little bit, but then he injured his shoulder, and that was the end of his season. Look, we mentioned it earlier with Jonathan Taylor. That should help alleviate some of the risks of hits and concussions. And Anthony Richardson, you know what? If he can do this consistently, or even if you knock him down to maybe 19 points per game as far as an average goes, or somewhere in between 21 and 29, like, come on, you're getting a great value here at quarterback 8. If he
look at Jalen Hurts' first 10 starts in Philly, that's his floor if he's healthy.
Right, Shane Steichen, the former offensive coordinator of the Philadelphia Eagles. Yeah. Here's where I feel comfortable taking the flyer here, and I say comfortable taking a flyer like, oh, how dare you take a flyer on one person who could be considered a top 5 quarterback in fantasy? Get past 4 games, then talk to me about being a top quarterback.
Yeah, for sure.
I need to see it first, but at this point for me, this is where I feel comfortable ranking him. Britt, who is your running back 8?
My running back 8, I'm going to go with Derrick Henry. I know he had an up and down 2023 season, but he was working behind a very atrocious offensive line in Tennessee, and he's in such a much better situation now in Baltimore. He's got a better quarterback, a more efficient offense, a more run-heavy situation, et cetera, et cetera. Everything you want for Derrick Henry is here in Baltimore, aside from the fact that, like we mentioned earlier, that he's going to be the thunder to Lamar Jackson's lightning. So I think that is going to cut in a little bit on his production, but he still doesn't have any competition. He is still a god among men as far as his physicality, his just everything about him. So I think he should be in line for most, if not all, of the rushing touchdowns that he gave up to Tajay Spears last season that Lamar Jackson doesn't get. So I still like Derrick Henry as a top quarterback or top running back this year.
Kevin, who's your wide receiver 8?
Wide receiver 8 is Puka Nacua. And that bet is one where Cooper Kupp maybe doesn't come back to, anything close to what he did in 2021. I know he's had some injury concerns. He had that tightrope surgery at the end of 2022. But look, 2.59 yards per route run, almost 10 yards per target. I think Puka has shown he should not be considered any kind of a fluke. We know this offense is going to be passing the ball a ton. Between Cooper Kupp, Demarcus Robinson, and Puka Nacua, plus whether it's Higbee, whether it's Davis Allen, I still think that Puka Nacua is one of is going to be the pseudo engine that this offense runs behind. So I am definitely in on Puka Nacua. I'm still drafting Cooper Kupp where he lands too as far as ADP, but I'm totally fine if I have to take if I have to settle for Puka Nacua like the 1-2 turn.
Nice.
His playoff performance to me was like when I was I'm all in. Like, 'cause I wondered how much of it was Kupp missing and stuff, but when that playoff game, they were doing everything they could to stop him, and he just kept killing Detroit. I was like, okay, I'm all in. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm just gonna say it's crazy to think about, like when we talk about in the dynasty circles with Puka Nacua starting out at Washington and then transferring to BYU. Usually stuff like that is a big, clear red flag for a prospect. And, Puka has just said, hold my beer, F you guys.
And Jorge said Jaden Daniels will do the same thing this year. So my tight end 8, Jake Ferguson, the Dallas Cowboys. Yes, CeeDee Lamb is going to catch a gazillion passes. Kevin was right to bring that up. That is true. But, I mean,
it do be like that.
Let's be honest. Like, what else did Dallas address?
Not shit.
They brought in Ezekiel Elliott.
I think that's the technical term. As Britt said, it's not shit. The running game. We'll see. I'm a Rico Dotto truther, but even I'm a little nervous. The defense that really was weak down the stretch last year. They didn't really do anything to address it either. And I have a feeling that Dak's arm might fall off this year because he is already somebody that throws it as much as anybody in the league. And the Cowboys have been good for most of these seasons. This could be the year. It feels like they punted. And again, kind of like with my Falcons, it's kind of nice to have guys on offenses that are going to be down or going to be throwing a ton. And I think Dallas is definitely going to be one of those two things on a consistent basis this year. I think Ferguson could have a really big breakout year. Another guy that really picked up steam down the stretch after him and Dak got more acquainted as the season went on.
Mm-hmm.
I just can't see. I was just gonna say I just can't see him as anything more than like a doppelganger of Dalton Schultz. But I'm more than willing to be wrong on that take.
But they had Amari Cooper when he was there, and there's no Amari Cooper. Like, I like Brandon Cooks, but he doesn't have the upside of Amari Cooper.
I think it's going to be one of those things where I know now people are trying to make Jalen Tolbert a thing as the wide receiver 3, but as we've seen with some teams, like the Green Bay wide receiver 2 is the biggest. Who is going to be the wide receiver 2 in Green Bay? Maybe it's just not anybody, and maybe that's kind of the same thing in Dallas. Maybe it just literally feeds through CeeDee Lamb, and then Ferguson and Cooks can battle it out for the second target, and then does it really matter who the third guy is because it can be like a group of 7 guys with 40 targets.
All right, let's go to round 9. I'm going CJ Stroud. I just love the upgrades that you've seen on both sides of the ball here with the Houston Texans. And the thing for me that really gives me a lot of confidence in him being a top 10 quarterback for fantasy is his offensive coordinator could have taken any head coaching job in the NFL and decided, I'm going to come back and take this offense that we have. We're going to add Stephon Diggs, and we're going to get Joe Mixon in a trade. I mean, we're going to give you all these pieces. CJ Stroud, onward, young man. And I just feel like this is a good spot to get him at quarterback 9. Is that a little bit too rich or too low? Kevin, what are your thoughts?
No, I have no problem with CJ Stroud. I'm a little worried about I guess I shouldn't say that I have no problem with him. I have no problem if I can get him at QB 9, certainly, because that's that's what 4 spots below ADP. But just the fact that he's not running as much, and you're basically hoping that he could be like a massive 40 touchdown thrower in this. That's what you're hoping for with guys like that maybe don't run and create a lot of their rushing offenses. You have to have a 40, 45 touchdown season and close to 5,000 yards to be able to get into that stratosphere with those rushing quarterbacks. But
it reminds me so much of Justin Herbert, because I remember after his rookie season going, there's no way this guy is going to be this accurate down the field and is going to be this good of a, thrower. And
right.
You know what? He was even better. And the Texans actually have all these weapons to where I wanted to come into this season saying CJ Stroud's going to regress. You can't have the kind of season that he had as a rookie and then not the NFL hit back. But then my good buddy Joe Matt said it's why we do the DFS show together and why I call him Joe the Brain goes, Keith, Justin Herbert. Remember how wrong we were about Justin Herbert year 2? And he's absolutely right. Like, that's basically the situation with, I think, even better weapons.
And they got a better running game. I mean, their running game was basically non-existent last season. And then they bring in Mixon, who's not hyper efficient, but he's still a guy who can take hits, who can, catch the ball, who can do all these things. I think that he should be higher. I'm willing to take CJ Stroud at ADP right now, but
thank you for saying Mixon isn't efficient, so I didn't have to.
I mean, that's why he's not in my top 10. Spoiler.
Well, who's your number 9, Britt?
So my number 9 is Travis Etienne, and there was a recent article that came out today or yesterday. I don't know. Time's all, mangled. But Doug Peterson said yet again this year that they want to decrease Etienne's workload in favor of Tank Bigsby. But that is exactly
I fell for that
what
shit
happened
last year.
No, exactly. And what happened? He had 267 rushing attempts, over 1,000 rushing yards, 476 receiving yards, and 12 touchdowns, finishing as RB3 in PPR leagues.
Wow.
I wrote in my notes, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I'm not falling for this ever again. And kind of like Mixon, he may not be hyper efficient, but the Jaguars offense was one of the best in the league until they kind of fell off late season, but we won't talk about that. And they should be able to get back to form this year. So I think that Etienne was top 10 in nearly every metric that counts. And if the Jags offensive line can improve, because they did have some problems in that area, he should be right back to where he was last year. Even if Bigsby manages to mix in just a little bit.
Doug Peterson can't keep getting away with this.
He's a liar. He's a dirty, dirty liar.
Especially if you're talking about, if it was like somebody that maybe had talent, I would say if you said that about Dearness Johnson, who they did
Don't go read my rookie profile on Tank Bigsby, asshole, but that's fine.
Is there any more misnomer name than Tank Bigsby, by the way? But yeah,
that was part of it. I just liked his name, but that's all right.
I mean, I like his name too. That he sounds like a future 10 touchdown, running back.
He went to Auburn, so that was,
maybe that's in the AFL and not the NFL.
All right, gentlemen. Stacy's going to kill me because we got to get to this draft show pretty quickly. So let's round out these last two. Rapid fire. Kevin, who's your wide receiver 9?
Wide receiver 9 is the number 1 wide receiver in open score last year, 3rd in yards per route run. That is Brandon Ayuk of the San Francisco 49ers. That 3.01 yards per route run reflects how efficient this offense was in San Francisco. And 75, 13, 42, and 7 touchdowns last year on only like 100 targets, which is just absolutely wild. He really needs a lot of efficiency, but I understand wanting Debo maybe a little bit later or Kittle a few rounds later, but still you're getting a massive piece of this efficiency pie in San Francisco.
Keith, tight end 9 for you.
Mark Andrews. I believe in Isaiah Likely. I'm concerned about Mark Andrews' numbers. If you look over the last few years, I'm not saying he could end up having a monster year, but I would tread very carefully, especially for where I see him going currently with his ADP.
All right,
he's blocked a little more. He's blocked a little more last year too.
Yep.
Do not underestimate the whole blocking thing, taking away snaps in the receiving game there, folks. All right, finishing up the 10th round, my quarterback. Keith, this is for you, buddy. It's Brock Purdy. Give me the guy who is a quote-unquote game manager that averages 18.5 points per game in his 3rd year in a Shanahan offense. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid there. QB3 and touchdown passes when under pressure. I'm all on board. Nothing's changing in San Francisco scheme-wise. The same players are going to be there. Yes, I understand. Well, he just dumps the ball off and they just go.
That's
wrong.
not true. He threw the ball down the field as much as any
You
player.
had like a 13-yard 8-out last year.
I was gonna
What are we doing?
Exactly. That's the misnomer. That's right there. Like the guy can do a lot. I believe in the coaching. I believe in the performance. And yeah, give me that 18.5 point per game floor. Britt, what's your QB or RB10?
I'm going to close out with Rachaad White because it's very hard to underestimate the impact that he had based on pure opportunity share, second in total carries, ninth in red zone carries, second in routes run, first in catch rate. This guy was everywhere on the field and finished as RB4 in PPR leagues, even though he wasn't incredibly efficient on the ground. But Tampa Bay did beef up their offensive line. They got Graham Barton out of Duke. They got UTEP's Elijah Klein. They also brought in Bucky Irving, but I think that he's a depth piece because remember last season, everyone was like, oh, Sean Tucker's going to get this job. Sean Tucker's going to get this job. I don't think I saw Sean Tucker on the field. This is Rachaad White's backfield, especially in the receiving game. His PPR upside is unmatched. That's why he rounds out my top 10.
Kevin, who's your wide receiver 10?
Well, I will say they did try Chase Edmonds and he didn't work either, so that's why they drafted running back. But yes, I am very much in on Bucky Irving. My my number 10 wide receiver is Drake London for all the reasons we talked about the Atlanta Falcons offense and more. As the great Pat Kerrane said, Drake London is just Michael Pittman with a better publicist. But I am still very much in on Drake London. If the thesis that we're talking about the Rams light offense in Atlanta is a thing, you have to be in on Drake London.
Just for the record, real quickly, London over the middle last year averaged 13.8 yards per reception. Tyreek Hill averaged the same number. CeeDee Lamb 13.5, Puka 13.3, and have Desmond Ridder throwing to. That's a great call, Kevin. I'm rounding out the tight ends. I feel like Dave Letterman, top 10, with George Kittle. And I feel like this is probably way too late. But again, we've just seen like Kittle is such a frustrating guy to have in fantasy because if he was targeted more, the talent's there. He has those games. He's somebody I love using in DFS, hate drafting him. But actually this year with all these young tight ends, he's falling to a range where I feel a lot better about taking him, understanding there's going to be good and bad weeks and living with it instead of, in previous years, taking him at like tight end 4 and having, 6 weeks of, I don't know, name literally any tight end and they scored more points than him.
Mm-hmm.
Very nice. Very nice. All right. Well, that's going to wrap up our early redraft top 10 at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end. Stay tuned. Our very own FF Chalupa Batman, a.k.a. Zach, will be making graphics for these. So that way, for those of you who missed some of the show, you will see that on the interwebs. Stacey Perez is up next with the Fantasy and Frames draft show. They're doing another Best Ball Mania draft, but this time, everybody's going to have some input in this draft. The chaos that's about to happen here on the Fantasy and Frames channel.
Brock Bowers in the second round. Let's go.
See, this is what you're in for, folks. So it was great having everybody back together again. We'll be back next week to talk Scott Fishbowl 14 scoring. So for Britt, for Kevin, for Keith, I'm Jorge.